Most people talk about confidence as if it's a personality trait, as if there are two kinds of people in the world, those who have it and those who don't. The ones who walk into a room and command attention, the ones who speak without their voice shaking, the ones who raise their hand, take the risk, make the call, start the business, lead the team, and then everyone else. The ones who sit in the back, the ones who wait, the ones who say, one day when I'm more confident, then I'll start. And that belief that confidence comes first is one of the biggest lies we've ever accepted. Because confidence is not something you are born with. It is not something handed to you by genetics or luck or fate. Confidence is something the brain builds when it witnesses you doing hard things and surviving them. Over and over again, your brain is a scientist. It doesn't care about your dreams, your affirmations, your vision boards, or the motivational quotes on your wall. Your brain cares about data, evidence, proof, and the only way it collects that proof is by watching what you do when things are uncomfortable, uncertain, or scary. You don't wake up one day and feel confident and then take action. You take action and then much later you realize, I've become confident. This is the science most people never learn. There is a part of the brain whose only job is to keep you alive. It is ancient, it is cautious, it is obsessed with safety. It would prefer comfort that you hate over uncertainty that could help you grow. It would rather keep you small and alive than bold and at risk. So when you think about starting something new, speaking up, going for a higher position, leaving a toxic job, having a difficult conversation, your brain doesn't say, let's grow. It says, let's survive. It shows you every possible bad outcome. It reminds you of every past failure. It plays old memories at the worst possible time and calls it logic. And most people confuse that voice with truth. But it's not truth, it's a biological reflex. Your brain is not designed for your greatness. It is designed for your survival. And that's why, if you wait until your brain gives you permission, you will wait forever. Confidence is not built by eliminating fear. Confidence is built by moving forward with fear present and teaching the brain a new pattern. Even with fear, I am safe. Even with doubt, I am capable. Even with uncertainty, I can handle this. Every time you take a small step despite fear, you are rewiring your brain. You are changing your chemistry. You are literally upgrading the system that runs your life. This is why micro wins matter more than massive victories. We love the big stories, the overnight success, the giant breakthrough, the moment someone finally made it. But the brain doesn't rewire itself in dramatic leaps. It rewires itself through repetition, through patterns, through consistency. Confidence isn't built in the big moment. It's built in the quiet, unglamorous, uncelebrated decisions. When you wake up on time instead of snoozing. When you go for the walk even when it's cold. When you speak up even though your heart is racing. When you try again even after failing. Your brain is always watching you, and it is always recording a story about who you are. If you quit often, it records, this is someone who quits. If you avoid challenges, it records, this is someone who avoids. If you delay change, it records, this is someone who stays the same. But when you show up consistently, even imperfectly, it starts to write a new identity. This is someone who persists. This is someone who tries again. This is someone who is becoming stronger. And identity is where confidence is born. Most people focus on techniques, on tricks, on hacks, on what to say, how to stand, how to breathe, how to fake it. They try to look confident instead of becoming confident. They practice the performance, but ignore the foundation. And a building with a weak foundation always collapses under pressure. True confidence is quiet. It's not loud or desperate for attention. It doesn't need to prove anything. It is rooted in knowing, I've handled hard things before, I can handle this too. And that knowing only comes from lived experience. Not imagined success, not planned success, not talked about success, lived success, even the smallest version of it. This is why purpose is essential, because if you only rely on motivation, you will lose every time. Motivation is emotional. It comes and goes. It depends on the weather, your mood, your energy, what someone said to you that morning. But purpose is different. Purpose is a deep reason, a deep why, a reason that sinks below comfort and fear. When you know why you're doing something, discomfort becomes meaningful, pain becomes part of the path instead of a signal to stop. Fear becomes a sign that you're moving in the right direction, not the wrong one. The human brain can endure almost any how when it understands a strong enough why. A mother working 2 jobs isn't confident because she feels strong. She's confident because she must be. A leader in crisis isn't fearless. They are focused on something bigger than themselves. Purpose silences doubt by giving the mind somewhere else to look. So the question is not, how do I become more confident? The real question is, what am I willing to endure discomfort for? Because the moment your actions are connected to something bigger than your own comfort, your behavior changes. And the moment your behavior changes, your brain starts building new evidence, and that evidence, repeated over time, creates a new identity. And a new identity creates confidence. There is another factor, one most people underestimate, and that is environment. Your environment is more powerful than your willpower. If you place a disciplined person in a toxic, draining, negative environment long enough, that discipline will break. If you place an unmotivated person in a supportive, growth, focused environment long enough, their behavior will rise to match it. Your environment is either feeding your doubt or feeding your growth, the people you speak to, the conversations you engage in. The content you consume, the standards around you, all of it is shaping the story you believe about yourself. You cannot become a new version of yourself in an environment that is invested in the old one. You cannot rise while surrounded by voices that benefit from you staying the same. You cannot build confidence in a place that punishes you for trying. Confidence is not just personal. It is environmental, it is cultural, it is relational. That's why leaders matter, not as titles, but as examples. The example of someone who tries, the example of someone who stands up again, the example of someone who refuses to quit on themselves. Because courage is contagious, and so is doubt, the question is, which one are you spreading, and which one are you absorbing? And now we come to the part that most people don't want to hear. There is no moment when it gets easier. There is no moment when fear disappears. There is no moment when you suddenly feel ready. There is only the moment when you decide that the life you are living is no longer acceptable. And in that moment, confidence is not required. Only courage is. Courage is simply action in the presence of fear. And every time you choose courage, even in the smallest way, you make a deposit into the account of confidence. Day by day, choice by choice, step by step, until one day you don't recognize the person you used to be. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You don't wake up confident, you wake up committed. Committed to trying again, committed to standing up again, committed to honoring the person you are becoming, not the one you used to be. And over time, through repetition, through purpose, through environment, through discomfort, your brain looks at all the evidence you have gathered and comes to a new conclusion. Not a hope, not a wish, not a fantasy, a conclusion, I can handle this. And that is confidence, not loud, not flashy, not arrogant, just steady, just grounded, just real. So if today you feel small, uncertain, afraid, unprepared, you are not lacking confidence, you are standing at the exact moment it is created. Take the step anyway, let your hands shake, let your voice tremble, let your heart race, move forward. Your brain is watching, and it is learning who you are. We often grow up believing that confidence is a feeling. We imagine it like a switch that flips inside certain people. One day they wake up and they just have it. They believe in themselves, they feel certain, they feel ready, and because they feel ready, they act. They speak, they lead, they take the risk. Meanwhile, others spend their whole lives waiting for that same feeling to arrive, convinced that once it does, their life will finally begin. But here is the uncomfortable truth. That feeling is not something that appears out of nowhere. It is not a gift. It is not a personality type. It is not reserved for the bold or the lucky or the chosen. It is a byproduct, a result, a response to something much more important than emotion. Confidence is built on evidence. Your mind is constantly observing you. Every choice you make, every action you take or avoid, every time you step forward or step back, your brain is recording data. It is building a case for who you are, and once it has collected enough evidence, it presents a verdict. That verdict becomes your self-image. If the evidence shows that you quit when things get hard, your brain concludes you are the kind of person who quits. If the evidence shows that you avoid challenges, your brain concludes you are the kind of person who avoids. If the evidence shows that you keep going, even when it's uncomfortable, your brain begins to form a different belief. You are the kind of person who endures. And belief in yourself is not the starting point of confidence, it is the outcome. So many people think, if only I believed in myself more, I would try harder, take risks, live bigger. But the mind does not work that way. Belief follows behavior, not the other way around. This is why positive thinking often fails. You can stand in front of a mirror and repeat affirmations all day long. You can say, I am confident, I am strong, I am capable. But if your actions do not match those words, your brain rejects them as fantasy. It cannot accept statements that are unsupported by evidence. So it waits and it watches to see if you are willing to get uncomfortable. It watches to see if you are willing to make mistakes. It watches to see if you are willing to try again after failing. And slowly, through repeated actions, it updates its story about you. This is where fear enters the picture. Fear is not the enemy. Fear is a biological signal. It exists to protect you from danger. Millions of years ago, that danger might have been a predator. Today, it might be judgment, embarrassment, rejection, or failure. But to the brain, the response is the same. Heart rate increases, muscles tense, palms sweat, thoughts race. The body prepares for fight, flight, or freeze. The problem is, we have been taught that fear is a sign to stop, to go back, to stay safe, but in reality, fear is often a sign that you are standing at the edge of growth. Every time you step into something new, your brain interprets it as dangerous because it is unknown. And the unknown feels like a threat. Your body cannot tell the difference between a lion in the grass and a difficult conversation with a coworker. Both trigger the same response, and most people obey that response. They retreat, they delay, they make excuses. Not because they are weak, but because they are human. But there are those who learn to interpret fear differently. They understand that fear is not a stop sign. It is a signal that something meaningful is happening, that they are stretching beyond who they used to be. These people are not more confident than others in the beginning. They are simply more willing to move while afraid. They act with a shaking voice. They take the step even though their mind is screaming at them not to. And after they do, something important happens. They survive, and once they survive, the brain records new evidence. That was scary, but you lived. That was uncomfortable, but you handled it. That was difficult, but you didn't die. And with every repetition, the fear starts to loosen its grip. Not because the world has become safer, but because you have become stronger. This is how confidence is formed. It is a memory bank of survived discomfort. And this is why small actions matter so much more than big dreams. The mind does not grow from inspiration alone. It grows from implementation. It grows from doing. It grows from repetition. A single massive action might feel empowering, but it is the quiet habits, the daily commitments, the almost boring consistency that changes how the brain sees you. When you make your bed even when you don't feel like it, when you go to the gym even when motivation is missing, When you practice your craft even when no one is watching, when you speak up even though your voice trembles. These are not just tasks, they are signals you send to yourself, and the message is clear: I am someone who shows up. Over time, those signals shape your identity. And identity is more powerful than motivation. You don't act a certain way because you feel confident. You act a certain way because this is who I am. And when who you are becomes someone who tries, who persists, who stands up again, confidence has no choice but to follow. But there is another layer to this, one that is often overlooked: meaning. Human beings are not driven by logic alone. We are driven by meaning. We can tolerate pain, we can endure uncertainty, we can face fear, but only when there is a reason strong enough to make it worthwhile. This is why people can work long hours to support their families, yet cannot spend 10 minutes on their own dreams. This is why someone will push themselves to exhaustion for a cause they believe in, but quickly give up on something that only benefits them. Meaning fuels endurance, purpose strengthens resolve. When your actions are connected to something bigger than your comfort, your mind stops asking, "How can I stay safe?" and starts asking, "How can I be useful?" In that shift, confidence begins to grow faster, because purpose changes the way you interpret struggle. Struggle is no longer a sign to stop. It is proof that you are on the right path. Pain is no longer an enemy. It is part of the process. Difficulty is no longer personal. It is simply the price of becoming more than you were yesterday, and when you accept that price instead of resenting it, you start to stand differently. Speak differently, think differently, not because you are pretending, but because you know what you are standing for. That kind of confidence cannot be shaken by criticism, because it does not come from approval. It comes from alignment. From knowing that your actions serve something meaningful. Environment also plays a critical role in this process. You cannot expect a plant to grow in poisoned soil. You cannot expect your confidence to build in a space that constantly reminds you of your limitations. The people around you, the messages you hear daily, the standards you observe, all of these things quietly shape your perception of what is possible. If you are surrounded by people who complain, who belittle ambition, who mock change, who doubt growth, then even your strongest intentions will begin to weaken. Not because there is anything wrong with you, but because the human mind absorbs the expectations of its environment. On the other hand, place yourself among those who are trying, learning, failing, and trying again, and something inside you rises to meet that standard. You start to see new possibilities, new versions of yourself, and the brain, seeing others push forward, begins to accept that perhaps you can as well. Confidence is not just an individual journey, it is a collective one. It is shaped by who we walk with, who we listen to, who we allow to speak into our lives. Choosing the right environment is not a luxury. It is a strategy for survival and growth. And still, even with purpose, with environment, with understanding, there will be days when doubt is louder than belief. Days when you feel like you have made no progress. Days when you look at others and feel small. Days when the old story tries to return. This is normal. Growth is not a straight line. It is a series of steps forward and moments of hesitation. But the difference between those who develop confidence and those who don't is not perfection, it is persistence. The confident person is not the one who never falls, it is the one who refuses to stay down. And every time you stand up again, no matter how slowly, you strengthen the story your brain is telling about you. A story that says, I am resilient, I am capable, I do not quit on myself. Over time, that story becomes louder than your fear. And one day, almost without noticing, you realize that you are no longer the person you used to be. You are no longer waiting, you are no longer hiding, you are no longer asking for permission, you are simply doing what needs to be done. Not because you feel confident, but because confidence has already been built, choice by choice, action by action, moment by moment. That is the science of building confidence, not a feeling, not a gift, not an accident, but a process, a discipline, a decision to move forward, even when it is hard. And the most beautiful part is this: you do not have to wait for anyone's approval to begin. You do not need perfect conditions, you do not need to be fearless, you only need to take the next small step. Your brain is watching, your future is waiting, and the story you tell yourself tomorrow depends entirely on what you choose to do today. There is a quiet misunderstanding that lives in the minds of so many people. It's the belief that confidence appears before the journey begins, that it comes like a green light that flashes on and tells you it is finally safe to move, finally safe to try, finally safe to become. People wait years for that light. They wait for the perfect moment, the perfect conditions, the perfect version of themselves. And while they wait, life passes them by in ordinary days filled with unfulfilled potential. But confidence does not operate on permission. It does not arrive with a certificate. It does not come from comfort. It is born in the exact opposite conditions most people are willing to accept. Confidence is forged in uncertainty. It grows where the ground is unfamiliar and the outcome is unclear. It is built in the moments where you feel least ready, least prepared, least certain about who you are and what you are capable of. That is not a flaw in the process, that is the design of it. The human brain is wired primarily for survival. For most of our history, survival was the only objective. Find food, avoid danger, stay within the safety of the group. Anything unfamiliar, anything new, anything that separated you from the crowd could cost your life. And so, deep in the architecture of your mind, there is a system that becomes suspicious the moment you step outside routine. That system does not exist to make you successful. It exists to keep you alive. So when you step into a new opportunity, when you dare to express an idea, when you imagine a bigger version of your future, your brain does not celebrate with you. It protests, it tightens your chest, it fills your mind with questions, doubts, and worst-case scenarios. And then it whispers, very persuasively, now is not the right time. Most people listen. And by listening, they collect evidence that reinforces the same conclusion. You are not brave, you are not ready, you are not capable. That conclusion becomes a belief. And that belief becomes an identity, and that identity becomes a life. But there are a few who choose differently, not because they are fearless, not because they are special, not because they have more clarity. They choose differently because they understand something others do not. They understand that fear is not an instruction, it is information, and often it is information that you are standing on the edge of something meaningful. Instead of asking, how do I make this fear stop? They ask, what is this fear trying to show me about the direction I need to go? They have learned that growth feels the same as danger to the nervous system. The body cannot tell the difference between a threat to survival and a challenge to identity. And so it reacts the same way, but the courageous do not interpret that reaction as a command to stop. They see it as confirmation that they are stepping beyond their old limits. They accept the discomfort as a necessary part of transformation. And so they take a step anyway. It might be small, so small that no one else notices it, so small that it seems insignificant. But that step to the brain is monumental. It is evidence that challenges the old narrative. It says, perhaps you are stronger than you thought. Perhaps the unknown is not always fatal. Perhaps you can survive more than you imagined. And that single piece of evidence is priceless. Because the brain operates like a courtroom, it is constantly gathering proof, building arguments, and arriving at conclusions about who you are. Every action is a testimony. Every choice is a witness, and over time, the case becomes stronger. When the evidence for courage outweighs the evidence for retreat, a new identity begins to form. And identity is everything. People do not rise to the level of their goals. They fall to the level of their identity. If you see yourself as someone who gives up, someone who avoids risk, someone who stays small, then no amount of inspiration will change you. Your actions will always be aligned with that self-image. But if you begin to see yourself as someone who tries, someone who perseveres, someone who stands up again, then even in moments of doubt, you will act in alignment with that identity. This is the real science behind confidence. It is nothing mystical. It is the natural result of accumulated behavior over time. That is why the smallest habits matter more than grand declarations. You don't build confidence by announcing your dreams. You build it by honoring your commitments, even the quiet ones, especially the quiet ones. The moment you keep a promise to yourself when no one else is watching, you send a message to your mind, my word matters. And when your word matters to you, you begin to trust yourself. And when you trust yourself, confidence emerges naturally. Trust is not built with intensity, it is built with consistency. Think about it. You don't trust someone who makes one big promise. You trust the one who shows up every time they said they would. You trust the one who follows through on the small things, and the same is true in your relationship with yourself. Self-trust is the foundation of confidence, and self-trust is built through repeated, aligned action. Over time, this changes the way you move through the world. You stop hesitating before every decision. You stop asking for external validation. You stop measuring your worth by the reaction of others, because the most important witness to your life is no longer the crowd. It is you, and when you begin to respect yourself, others begin to feel it too. But confidence is not loud. It does not seek attention. It does not announce its presence. There is a quiet steadiness to it, a groundedness, a composure that does not require comparison. True confidence does not need to prove anything to anyone. It is not the absence of doubt. It is the decision not to obey it. And that is why purpose plays such a powerful role in this process. When your life is built only around comfort, every discomfort feels like an enemy. But when your life is anchored to something meaningful, discomfort becomes part of the cost, a price you are willing to pay in exchange for something greater. Purpose transforms pain into progress. It transforms fear into a guide. It transforms effort into meaning. If you look throughout history, every person who demonstrated extraordinary confidence was not driven by their own greatness. They were driven by the significance of what they were trying to protect, build, or change. Their confidence was not rooted in ego. It was rooted in service, in contribution, in impact that extended beyond themselves, and in that place, the fear of failure loses its power. Because failure is no longer about you, it is about the mission, and when the mission is bigger than the moment, you stand back up again and again, regardless of how you feel. That is why confidence at its highest level is actually humility. It is the humility to admit you don't know everything. The humility to begin before you are perfect. The humility to be a student of life rather than a victim of it. And paradoxically, it is that humility that gives you the strength to stand tall. You don't gain confidence by pretending to have all the answers. You gain it by being willing to search for them. As this process continues, day after day, decision after decision, something remarkable happens. The voice of doubt does not disappear, but it becomes quieter, and a new voice begins to rise, a voice that says, "You have been here before, and you have made it through." A voice that no longer sounds like fear, but like calm, reasoned certainty. That is not arrogance, that is memory. Memory of your own resilience, memory of your own effort, memory of your own evolution. And one day, you find yourself stepping into situations that once terrified you, and you move through them not with panic, but with presence. Not because the situation changed, but because you did. You did the work, you honored the discomfort. You chose courage again and again, and now that work speaks for itself through who you have become. Confidence, in the end, has very little to do with what the world thinks of you, and everything to do with what you know you have done. It is the silent agreement between you and your past self, the understanding that no matter what comes next, you will not abandon yourself. That is why confidence feels so powerful, because it is built on loyalty to your own becoming. You do not become confident by being perfect. You become confident by being persistent, and every time you refuse to give up on yourself, you strengthen that bond. Every time you take another step forward, even in the dark, you teach your mind a new truth, and that truth, repeated enough times, becomes unshakable. You can face uncertainty because you have faced it before. You can endure discomfort because you have endured it before. You can step into the unknown because you have walked through unknowns before, not because you are fearless, not because you are exceptional, but because you are practiced. And that is what confidence truly is in its purest form: practice in being brave, practice in moving forward, practice in trusting yourself. So if today you feel doubt creeping in again, that does not mean you are failing. It means you are growing. If today you feel uncertain about the next step, it does not mean you are lost. It means you are at the edge of expansion. Do not run from that moment. Stand in it, breathe in it, move through it, because on the other side of that discomfort is the next version of you, a version shaped by courage, reinforced by purpose, strengthened by evidence, and grounded in truth. And that version of you is confident. Confidence is one of the most misunderstood forces in human behavior. Most people believe confidence is a personality trait, something you're either born with or not, something reserved for the loud, the bold, the outspoken, the fearless. We look at people who walk into a room with their shoulders back and head high and assume they possess some magical internal gift we simply didn't receive. But science tells a very different story. Confidence isn't inherited, it isn't gifted, and it is certainly not fixed. Confidence is built quietly, deliberately, and over time. At its core, confidence is not an emotion. It is a pattern your brain recognizes. It is the result of consistency meeting evidence. When you do something repeatedly and survive, your brain collects proof. When your brain sees proof, it reduces fear. And when fear is reduced, confidence shows up. That's how it works. Confidence is not built by shouting affirmations in the mirror. It is built by keeping promises to yourself when nobody is watching. Every human being is born with a brain designed for survival. That brain is wired to notice danger more than opportunity, to remember failure more than success, and to protect us from harm even when there is no actual danger present. This is why self-doubt is so common. It's not a weakness, it's biology. The problem comes when we believe that doubt is truth. It isn't, it's simply chemistry and history talking louder than reality. Confidence is created when we rewrite that history. Every experience you've ever had has left a mark, a memory, a pattern. Your brain stores those patterns and uses them to predict your future. If you failed at something before, your brain assumes you'll fail again. If you were criticized before, your brain expects criticism again. That expectation triggers hesitation, that hesitation limits action, and that limitation becomes self-fulfilling. This loop is not personal, it is neurological, and the only way to break it is to start accumulating new patterns. Small wins matter more than big dreams. Large goals inspire, but small actions reprogram. When you make your bed, when you finish a workout, when you speak up once in a meeting, when you try even though you're uncomfortable, you are not just completing tasks. You are handing your brain a new story, proof that you are capable, proof that discomfort is survivable, proof that you can be trusted. The brain is a prediction machine. Give it better data, and it will give you better beliefs. True confidence is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that fear will not be the final voice in the room. In fact, the most confident people feel fear every single day. The only difference is they don't let that fear dictate behavior. They understand something others don't. Feelings do not equal facts. Most people are waiting to feel confident before they start. The confident people start before they feel ready. That's the shift, not someday, not when it feels safe. Not when conditions are perfect. They start while their hands are shaking, and with every step forward, the fear shrinks because the evidence grows. Think about when you first learned to drive. At the beginning, every movement required conscious thought. The checking of mirrors, the position of your hands, the pressure on the pedal. Everything felt overwhelming. But you didn't stop, you practiced, and eventually, what once terrified you became automatic. That is the science of progress. Repetition rewires the brain, discipline builds identity, confidence is deeply tied to identity, not the identity others give you, but the one you repeatedly prove to yourself. If you see yourself as someone who quits, your brain will support that identity. If you see yourself as someone who honors commitments, your brain will support that identity too. Identity is not declared, it is demonstrated. You don't become confident by saying, "I am confident." You become confident by doing the things a confident person does, especially when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's hard, especially when no one is applauding. That's when confidence is actually being formed. Quietly, invisibly, powerfully, there is also a biological dimension to confidence. When you take decisive action, your brain releases dopamine. Dopamine is a chemical of progress. It signals reward, not for success, but for movement toward a goal. This is why procrastination feels heavy and action feels lighter. The moment you begin, your brain shifts chemistry. Momentum is literally hormonal. Meanwhile, failure does not destroy confidence. Avoidance does. When you avoid something, your brain labels it as a threat. When you face something, even if you fail, your brain labels it as manageable. Exposure reduces fear. That's the same science used in therapy for phobias. The more you step toward a fear, the smaller it becomes in your mind. That is not motivational talk, that is neuroscience, and yet we are living in a world that celebrates outcomes, not effort. We praise the win, not the attempt. We admire the finish line, not the steps taken to get there. This creates a toxic standard in our minds. We believe confidence belongs to the winners when in reality it belongs to the triers. Confidence is built by participation, not by victory. This is why comparison is so dangerous. When you look at someone else's highlight reel and compare it to your behind the scenes life, your brain creates a false hierarchy. And false hierarchies crush confidence. Someone else's chapter 20 has nothing to do with your chapter 3. But your brain doesn't know that unless you remind it with logic and compassion, celebrating progress is crucial. Progress deserves recognition long before perfection is reached. In fact, perfection is an illusion. The brain is far more motivated by improvement than achievement. Even a 1% improvement creates a sense of growth. And growth is intoxicating. Confidence, then, is a byproduct of growth, and growth requires patience. We live in a culture that demands instant results, but neuroscience is slow. Habits take time to form. Beliefs require repetition. Neural pathways strengthen with consistent use. You cannot rush rewiring. You cannot fast-forward resilience. You cannot download self-belief. It is installed through daily action. And consistency always beats intensity. One massive effort followed by long breaks does almost nothing for your confidence. But small effort every day changes you completely, because every day you show up, you cast a vote for the person you are becoming. And those votes add up. One vote doesn't change anything, but thousands of votes do. Eventually, that identity becomes real. One of the strongest sources of confidence is integrity. When your words and actions align, your brain trusts you. When they don't, your brain doubts you. Most people are not suffering from lack of talent or intelligence. They are suffering from broken self-trust. They promise and don't deliver. They plan and don't execute. After a while, their own minds stop believing in them. To build confidence, you must rebuild that trust. Make smaller promises, keep them, slowly increase the size. Let your brain see the pattern. Let it see that you are reliable. Once you trust yourself, other people will too. And here is one of the most powerful elements of confidence that science supports: meaning. People who believe their actions matter to something bigger than themselves operate with more courage. Meaning makes pain tolerable. Meaning gives fear a smaller voice. Meaning transforms struggle into purpose. When you know why you are doing something, your brain releases different chemicals. You persist longer. You recover faster. You build resilience. Confidence grows fastest when it is connected to service, not ego. When it's not about proving something, but contributing something. When your goal is to help, to build, to create, to uplift, you remove pressure from yourself and place focus on impact. And, ironically, that's when you perform your best. The brain follows the heart, and the heart follows purpose. So if you want real confidence, don't ask, how do I become more confident? Ask, who am I trying to serve? What am I trying to build? Why does it matter? Answer that, and the confidence will chase you, because confidence is not about thinking you're better than others. It's about knowing you are useful. It's about understanding your value. It's about showing up again and again, because the mission is bigger than your insecurity. And that's the final scientific truth. Confidence doesn't come from believing in yourself. That idea is too vague. Confidence comes from evidence, and evidence is created through action. Every time you step forward in spite of doubt, you produce evidence. Every time you refuse to quit, you produce evidence. Every time you try again, you produce evidence. And eventually, there is so much evidence that your brain can no longer argue. And in that moment, confidence is no longer something you chase. It is something you embody. You were never meant to wait for confidence. You were meant to build it. One decision at a time, one action at a time, one brave moment at a time, and it starts now. Confidence is not a loud voice. It doesn't announce itself. It does not demand attention or seek applause. Real confidence is quieter than people expect. It's a steady inner agreement between who you are and who you are becoming. It's not the absence of insecurity, but the presence of clarity. And that clarity is not something you discover, it is something you deliberately create. The science behind confidence is simple, yet most people avoid it because it requires patience, honesty, and consistency. Confidence is built through a series of small, repeated actions that teach your brain to trust you. That's it, not massive achievements, not perfect performances, just steady proof collected over time. Your mind does not measure big moments nearly as much as it measures reliable ones. It asks one constant question: can I count on you? And every time you answer with action, confidence grows a little more. We tend to overestimate the power of a single moment. We wait for a breakthrough, a big speech, a big win, a viral moment, a dramatic transformation. But the brain isn't impressed by drama. The brain is impressed by consistency. It is impressed by the ordinary choices you make repeatedly when nobody is watching. That is where identity is formed. That is where self-belief is written into your nervous system. Every choice you make sends a signal. Every time you avoid something difficult, your brain records, this is a threat. Every time you step into something difficult, even if you fail, your brain records, I survived. Survival builds confidence more than success ever could, because survival proves strength. Success can sometimes feel like luck. Survival never does, so the process of becoming confident is really the process of becoming familiar with discomfort. Discomfort is where the brain rewires itself, not when things are easy, not when you're praised, not when the path is clear. Growth happens when the heart is racing and the mind is uncertain, and you still choose to move forward. That decision is a signal to your brain that you are capable of handling more than you thought. Slowly, that signal becomes a belief. And over time, that belief becomes identity. Most people don't lack confidence, they lack evidence. And because they lack evidence, they borrow stories from their past, opinions from others, and fears from their imagination. The brain fills in the blanks with worst-case scenarios because it believes it's protecting you, but safety is not the same as growth. And a protected life will never be a confident one. If you want to reprogram your mind, you must give it something new to study. Each time you do what you said you would do, you strengthen a neural pathway associated with self-trust. Each time you break a promise to yourself, you weaken it. This is not emotional, it is biological. You are literally shaping the architecture of your brain with every decision. Confidence is not psychological motivation, it is neurological construction. So the first real step toward confidence is not motivation. It is integrity. When your words and actions align, your brain feels stable. When they do not, your brain feels uncertain. And uncertainty breeds insecurity. This is why people who constantly talk about what they're going to do but rarely follow through struggle the most with confidence. Their mind has seen too many broken contracts, it no longer believes them. To rebuild confidence, you must rebuild your credibility with yourself. Say less, do more, start small, repeat often. A 5-minute commitment kept every day for a year will do more for your confidence than a 5-hour commitment kept once and abandoned. The mind is a pattern recognition system. Patterns build trust, random bursts create confusion, and confusion destroys confidence. Another mistake people make is thinking confidence comes from external validation. They wait for someone to notice them, promote them, approve of them, love them, or reward them. But confidence that depends on applause is not confidence. It is dependency. It is fragile because it lives in other people's hands. True confidence is private. It is the quiet satisfaction that you are doing what you are meant to do, whether anyone is watching or not. It is the strength to continue when nobody is clapping, and the courage to continue when someone is criticizing. The science supports this too. The more your motivation comes from internal standards rather than external rewards, the more resilient your brain becomes. It becomes less reactive and more centered. You rely less on emotional highs and lows. You begin to operate from a place of purpose instead of insecurity. And purpose is a powerful chemical. Purpose reduces anxiety. Purpose increases dopamine and serotonin, the very chemicals responsible for mood and drive. Purpose strengthens focus and increases endurance, meaning quite literally makes you stronger, which means the fastest way to build confidence is not to ask, "How do I look?" but rather, "Why does this matter?" When you connect your effort to something meaningful, you remove the spotlight from your ego and place it on impact. And when ego is no longer in charge, fear loses power. This is why those who serve something bigger than themselves often appear the most confident. They are not consumed with how they are perceived, they are consumed with what needs to be done, and that focus is powerful. Confidence also grows through exposure. The first time you try something, your brain labels it as unknown, and unknown often equals danger in the mind. But the second time it is less unknown, the third time it becomes familiar. Familiarity breeds confidence. This is why routine and repetition are so vital. Each repetition tells the brain, this is safe, this is normal, this is me. You cannot think your way into confidence. You must behave your way into confidence. There will be moments when you do everything right and still fail. That is part of the process. Failure does not mean you lack confidence. It means you are in the process of building it. Avoidance destroys confidence. Failure strengthens it. If you choose to interpret it correctly, your inner dialogue matters. When you fail, do you say, "I am not good enough," or do you say, "This is part of learning"? The words you choose literally change the chemical response in your brain. Self-compassion produces calm and resilience. Self-criticism produces stress and doubt, and the brain cannot build confidence in a stressed environment. Kindness to yourself is not weakness, it is a scientific strategy for growth. Growth happens in a safe internal environment. Not a harsh one. The strongest people are not the ones who punish themselves. They are the ones who encourage themselves to try again. As your confidence grows, something fascinating happens. You become less dependent on outcome. You start to realize that failure does not define you. Success does not define you either. Effort defines you, character defines you, values define you, and when your identity is clear, confidence is automatic. You stop asking whether you belong, you stop asking for permission, you stop shrinking to fit into spaces that were never built for your growth. Instead, you expand, and that expansion doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from alignment, from knowing who you are, what you believe in, and what you are willing to work for. That clarity is magnetic. This is why some of the most confident people in the world speak softly. They don't need to shout. They don't need to prove they are at peace. Their brain and heart are on the same side, and that peace is earned. Through discipline, through honesty, through courage, through repetition, through meaning, through service. Through thousands of small, invisible decisions that slowly transform into an unshakable sense of self. So if you are waiting for confidence, stop waiting. It will not arrive fully formed. But if you start today, if you take one honest step toward the person you want to be, your brain will take note. And tomorrow, that step will feel a little easier, and the next day easier still. Over time, those steps become your walk. That walk becomes your presence, that presence becomes your confidence, and one day someone will look at you and say, "You are so confident," and they will be wrong. Because confidence was not given to you, it was built by you.